Hey guys, I'm back tonight with another chess video. It's long awaited, and I've taken a long time between takes here to present to you another chess video. And just like the game of chess itself, I've been taking breaks from the game. I've had to do that over time. And first of all, as a disclaimer, before I get going with this game in particular, I just want to let you guys know that hey, you can be critical of stuff. You can be, uh, you can be this or that about how I play the game of chess, but no rude comments. Okay, no negativity. If you guys have nothing good to say about how I play the game of chess, your comments are going to be deleted. Okay, just want to give you a fair warning before you start typing like a keyboard warrior. Okay, good. Anyway, this game right here is more recent. I played this game like earlier today, and it's against an opponent I don't even know. But this turned out to be a really exciting game. And the opening here, since I have the black pieces, would be the Sicilian Defense, and in particular, the McDonnell Attack. For whatever reason, I find myself using the McDonnell Attack a lot when I'm playing as the Black Army, and there are many reasons behind that. But before we dive into that particular conversation, let's get the game going, shall we? Now, first of all, my opponent, he starts with the simple, basic e4 pawn opening, which is always good. I start with c5, that is the Sicilian defense. Um, my opponent goes f4, and this is why they have the McDonnell attack, because you want to create open space for you, with these pawns, particularly when you're having, this kind of balance. Like I'm going here, and this guy has his two pawns over here. So how I usually play this is that I go subtly with d6. Normally, that's how I do it. So the next move here, my opponent, knight f3, e6, c3. Now, I was surprised by that move because normally I don't see my opponents play that move. But nonetheless, I play bishop e7. I just want to get my bishop out there. Bishop b5, check. I see a lot of my opponents do this to me when I have this set up, and that's no surprise to me. So what do I do here? I just cover with my bishop. Bishop to d7. So a4 was my opponent's response. He wants to keep his bishop there. I'm like, fine, go ahead and do that. But I'm going to bring my knight out to knight f6 because I gotta clear the space for my king so that I can castle. Okay, that's always one of the fundamentals about chess. You have to castle early. You have to get your king in a good position to castle. So my opponent goes d3, and here I go with my castling. And likewise, my opponent castles as well. Next move that I make is a6. I'm challenging the bishop. So I'm wondering, where is this guy going to put his light squared bishop? And so what he does is that he takes the bishop. Bishop takes bishop, d7. And I go knight takes bishop on d7. Get my knight out of there. So next is knight to d2. The queen's knight to d2. My next move is queen to c7. Knight to c4. He's trying to establish something with this knight. I get that. But I can't be bothered by that. I have to drive the knight away. At least that's what I was thinking. So we exchange pawns, like so. A takes b5, a takes b5. And At this point of the game, I was really assuming that my opponent was just going to take the rook. I was setting myself up for a rook exchange right off the bat here, and knowing that his rook was not protected by either the queen or the rook, the bishop was like right here hanging. So I'm kind of surprised by what he did next. He moved his knight back to a3. Now, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but I do wonder what he was thinking. So I just marched my pawn forward to b4, attacking the knight again. Knight goes back to c2. Okay. And so at least with this, the knight is given the rook cover. I guess my opponent figured out that, hey, I need to protect my rook, which when I saw this, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm just going to take the rook. Boom, boom. Captures back with the knight. Okay, cool. Now, the next move I make is rook to b8. Now, I did this because I want to give this pawn chain some structure. I want to give it some protection. And this pawn in particular, I needed to protect. I really felt that at the time. So my opponent goes knight b3. But one thing here of note here about the knight is that I've noticed that he was moving his knight quite a bit. Like if you see here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of his last 7 moves at this point were just knight moves. So, you know, it's just really interesting how things develop the way that they do. Okay. So now we get to an interesting spot here. What did I just do? I captured the pawn with my knight on e4. Now you're basically going, Stephen, why'd you do that? You sacrificed your knight. Why did you do that? Well, bear with me. Okay, my opponent would obviously take the knight, e4, but I sensed that there was some sort of weakness in what my opponent was doing, moving this knight so much. So I wanted to exploit that. Keep driving the knight away, c4. Knight goes from b to d4. I just skip my pawn and gear here, b3. Queen goes down to e2. So finally he moves something other than the knight. d5, keep the pawn structure going. Take, take. Actually, no, not take, take. I wanted to make sure that I could pin the knight so that the knight can just not freely move again, because I have a pin on the king now. Although it would probably be best if I did just take back. So yeah, pawn takes again. Can't blame him for doing that. And now I just have to go ahead and take the knight. Bishop takes knight check on d4. Knight takes back on d4. And so I got to get this knight out of the way, or else he's going to get captured. Don't want to do that. So knight goes to f6. E pawn takes on f7. Check. Again, I can't blame the guy for doing it. I take back my king on f7. Now this he's he must be feeling good about himself because he's up by 4 points, basically, a bishop and a pawn. So you're probably wondering, okay, Stephen, what was the point of that knight sacrifice a few moves ago? Keep an eye on these 2 pawns. That's all I'm going to tell you guys. So the queen goes down to e6 check. The queen is protected by the knight. I got to move my king out of the way, king f8. Queen c6 wants a queen exchange, and I give it to him. Queen takes queen, knight takes queen on c6. Rook goes to c8 to simply challenge the knight. Knight goes back to e5. My knight goes up to e4. My opponent finally moves his bishop out of the way. The bishop, dark square bishop, goes to e3. Knight d6. Now at this point, I'm just trying to maneuver my knight into a good position so that, yes, it can protect this pawn, but also do something about these two pawns. I mean, my two pawns, they can't do anything if these pawns are just going to be here. So keep that in mind as well. Rook challenges my knight from d1. No surprise there. I move my knight up here to f5. So I do change course. I'm trying to challenge the bishop now. See where the bishop is going. Bishop goes back to f2, and the king protects it. My king goes up to e7. My opponent's pawn goes up to g4, challenging my knight again. Where does my knight go? Knight to d6. King g2. King e6. King f3. Now I know this guy, he wants to get his king in position to really be an active fighting piece. Again, I can't argue with that. I mean, I totally understand where he's coming from, but I know I have my own plans. So g6. Rook e1. He's thinking that he can catch me off guard because once he moves his knight, that's discover check with the rook. But I see that, and I go king d5. Maybe it's a bit overambitious that I move my king up, but I'm not worried by it. h4. He's moving all his pawns up. Now this is the move that I want you guys to pay attention to. Rook a8. Remember the two pawns I just talked about a minute ago. I think at this point in the game, my opponent lost sight of this, of what was going on here with the pawns. He was just so focused on using his pieces, which is not a bad thing, mind you, but if you don't keep an eye on what's going on here, you're going to lose track of the main point of the game. So I move my rook to a8. His knight goes down to d7. That's of no circumstance to me. I could tell what he was trying to do here. He's trying to get me into a fork so that he take my rook, but I see that. I just get my rook going right then and there. Rook a2. There we go. Going after that pawn cluster right there. Rook e2. My opponent finally realized that. Had to cover the pawns. My knight goes to b5 with a threat with that pawn. Okay, his knight goes back to f6 and puts a check on my king. So I'm like, okay. Move my king back to c6. And my opponent took my pawn in h7. Now, clearly that was an oversight on my part. I own up to that. Okay. I don't claim to be any great chess player in the world, mind you. So now here is something that you guys have got to watch out for. This is how I love to play. And it's a bit reckless, it's a bit, chaotic at times, but this is just how I play. Knight takes pawn on c3. I was at a point in the game where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for broke. And sometimes when you're playing a game like chess, you have to go for broke. Just look at certain famous players back in the day, like Mikhail Tal. He played very recklessly. He didn't care if he lost certain pieces as long as he got what he wanted. And that's just one example. So knight takes pawn at c3. I sacrifice my knight. Pawn takes knight at c3. And I just go ahead and take his rook on e2. and the king takes the rook on e2. But do you see what I see now? Do you see what I see? Even though the king took the rook, that didn't matter because I knew that my pawn here on b3 had an open road to get promoted. That's exactly what I mean, guys. That's why sometimes it pays to play reckless. So b2, knight to f8, b1 promotes the pawn to a queen. That's what I did. I promoted the pawn to a queen. That was my objective all along. So if you go further back in this game, you would realize that's what I was trying to do. So he takes my pawn, so what? I go ahead, queen d3, check, king has to move, and now what do I do? I could take the pawn, and I did think about that initially, but I did this, of course. Queen does take pawn at c3. Okay, excuse me, check. But this is what I had in mind as well. Boom. Queen to h3, check. And he made his last mistake here when he moved his king to e2, because I took this pawn on g4, check. And officially here, he resigned. That's what happened. Because let's say he does, move out of the way, I would simply take his knight. And he knew that. That's why he quit. He resigned. So that was the Sicilian Defense McDonnell Attack. And that's usually what I see a lot in these games when I play as black, when I have that Sicilian Defense set up. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And whether or not you guys approve of my style as a chess player, really, guys, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just sharing this game with you guys just because. So I hope you're having a good night and take care.